Okay, all right. So hopefully this is going to work much better, and I'll stick to the PowerPoint for the rest of the semester. So this is the second component that I would like to review during this introductory lecture. It's called Research in the United States, and it's really designed to get you introduced to how the research is not exactly made, but how the research is funded and enabled, I should say, in the United States. So again, the reason why we have this introduction and the reason why we have this discussion about the research is really related to the fact that you will be preparing your own proposal, and you will need to be able to come up with your own ideas, hypotheses, experimental details, and anticipated outcomes for the project which is related to your ideas and with the project which is unrelated to the research topic in your division. So looking at the broader picture or big picture outside of our own department, funding in the US is really conducted through a number of different venues. So a significant fraction of the research funding in the US is performed through government agencies, and the names of these government agencies, which you may have heard, are National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, NASA, U.S.A, USGS, NIST, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, EPA, and Department of Defense. So what you have here in the right column, you have the budget of the corresponding organizations, and what you can see, the budget of these organizations vary dramatically. The point that I'd like to emphasize here, this is the total budget of these organizations. So for example, in case of the NIH, it's how much money NIH spends on both intra and extramural programs. And in case of the DoD, this is the total budget of the DoD. It doesn't mean that the Department of Defense spends all of this money on research, but it spends a considerable chunk of money on research. With respect to which agency spends the most money, it's definitely NIH by far. Besides these government agencies, there are quite a few nonprofit and for-profit agencies which sponsor research in the US. There is quite a bit of other entities such as venture capital entities. So being able to request the funding from these agencies leads to funding of our research in our labs. The way we get this funding is we write what we call proposals, which have scientific components, professional components, such as, for example, our biosketches, and also budget information with respect to how much money we would like to receive in order to be able to perform a certain chunk of research for some of these agencies. So why do we request this money? Well, because doing science is actually quite expensive. In terms of what do we need to do for science, we really need to be able to purchase supplies, instruments, reagents. Science in general is by far is not cheap. So this is the reason why we write grant proposals, to be able to enable us to perform research experiments and science in our own laboratories. And primarily, we write our grant proposals to these government agencies, but this is not always the case. Sometimes we write proposals to some other venues.
Let me interrupt, Ed. Hiwa has a question.
Oh, great, fantastic. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry for disrupting, but I saw some, I think it should be error on the Blackboard for the breakout session PDF. The students have been switched in my section, I see that. So just to make sure that students are not getting confused.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think my section and Federica's section are switched.
Hiwa, is that on the breakout session on Canvas?
Yeah, on Canvas.
Okay, I'll fix that right now.
All right, cool.
Thank you for letting us know. I'll fix it right now for those of you who need to get your Zoom codes from the Canvas website. I'll do that while Ed's talking. So thank you.
Yes, we appreciate that. That's very important, actually. This way we don't end up with the people in the wrong room. Yeah. Thank you very much. Some other reasons why we ask for the research funding, besides the supplies in the laboratory, is really to pay for personnel salaries, benefits, and tuition to be able to support the personnel to be able to conduct these experiments, or large collaborative studies, for example. There are other charges that, that we need to be taken into consideration. So for example, we need to be mindful of the fact that in case of, if we use in our case, limited instrument center, there are user fees for this instrumentation. How do we raise the money? Same source from the government, primarily from the government funding. Research funding is also critical for keeping our jobs as professors, for example, because key component of a tenure decision and promotion actually comes from the fact whether the faculty was able to raise funding to support research. And research is one of our primary missions in this chemistry department. And another big component is if we really want to contribute to scientific discovery, innovation, improving quality of life in the society, this is what research funding is helping us to do. Besides of the fact that you may think, well, you are professors, you really, need to be thinking about research funding. We students may not necessarily care so much, and especially maybe I'm going to be going to an industry, not an academia. So if that would be a kind of an answer 15 years ago, I would kind of agree with you. This is no longer the case. There are quite a few fellowship research funding opportunities for PhD students and also for postdoctoral associates, and you really need to be mindful about this. Why? Because it gives you some degree of academic freedom. You may be able to focus on research projects of your liking in case if you manage to secure fellowship funding. You also become self-sufficient and more productive because you would not need to teach that much with respect to your TA fellowship. It also highlights your skills for potential employers. So in case of academia, this means that you know how the funding works. And and basically when you get this funding, typically the funding is awarded for productivity, and this is some sort of like a rubber stamp for the academia because you're very serious about your job prospects. You're very serious to stay in academia or stay in science in case if you transition into industry. For industry, it's very important because this means you can design a project and deliver executables. In case if you decide to go to consulting, it's also very important because there is quite a bit of write-up involved with consulting. But the last, but probably the most important aspect for securing fellowship research funding is really to be able to demonstrate that you are very, very motivated scientist. And this will be probably the strongest line in your CV when you're applying for postdoctoral jobs or for faculty jobs or for any other jobs for that matter. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of how science is getting funded and why you, the new generation of students, need to know how to write up the proposals, how to raise the money, whether it's related to your own fellowship or your future lab or your future job position in any different capacity. In case if you're going to be working for nonprofit, you will also need to be dealing with that. Moving on to the next slide. Creating the proposal is kind of the starting point for us. There is a grant life cycle, what we call, and it proceeds from generating your idea to finding the funding, which we're not gonna really focus a whole lot in this class. Primarily, we will focus on generating your ideas and developing your proposals. So what happens after that, we submit the proposals, there is award and negotiation, managing the award, we get the science done, we close out, we generate the new idea, and we move on in this perpetual cycle of proposals. This is how science is pushed, this is how the ideas are coming to life, and this is really exciting, as I hope we will convince you during this class. Again, probably the first and foremost important and most difficult part of our jobs and most difficult part of this class in general will be generating an idea. This is very, very difficult. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to conceptually switch from the point of when you're a student and when you're given the material and you're expected to learn something and to produce a result on the test. Here you need to come up with your own idea. And it's, I mean, our job with Medi-K will be to help you to learn how to do it. We can walk you through, but we will not be able to kind of like take you from one point and drop you at a different point. It's the path that you need to walk on your own. It's the path that you need to take to be able to grow as a scientist, as a professional, to be able to read the papers, come up with the ideas, and made them to the process of proposal writing. We will enable you with the tools and with helpful advices, but it's you as an individual, it's you as a scientist that will have to grow during this class to be able to become a person who can write grant proposals and to be able to market your idea to a funding agency. So the question, so the question that you will be asking yourself during the process, is there a need for this proposed work? When you're creating a proposal, who will benefit from this work? Why am I the right person to conduct this research work? Why is now the right time for this proposal? So these are the questions that we're asking ourselves, and these are the questions that you should try to ask yourself during this class too, and especially during the time when you're going to be writing your independent proposal. Is this an innovative leap forward, the most obvious next step? These are the questions that we ask ourselves with respect to when we create these ideas and when we try to market these ideas. So another thing that which is involved during the proposal preparation is what we call overarching hypothesis. And this is something that we generate to be able to pitch the ideas to the funding agencies. So what overarching hypothesis means is it's an idea that we're trying to hypothesize. So for example, applying, installing something will lead into something else to change a particular property because of something being employed. So it's very, very vague, and I'd rather give you a few examples. So an example of a hypothesis or overarching hypothesis, I should say, is applying the pressure to nitroglycerin will lead to the observation and explosion because of the ultra-fast decomposition of the molecules. It releases large amounts of energy into a short fraction of the time. So these overarching hypothesis, it's kind of the main driver for how we prepare the proposals and how we pitch the proposals to the funding agencies. I'm going to skip the next few slides because we're running out of time. And when you're preparing the proposals or when you're crafting the proposals or trying to come up with the ideas, because this is all part of the same process, when you create these proposals, they must align with the mission of the agency where you're going to be submitting this proposal. So as I was discussing during the previous slides, we have several different agencies in the US, several different government agencies. By far, NIH is the largest source of funding. And for this reason, during this class, we will be giving you the material in NIH's format. We don't imply that this is the only format, but this is the most probably widespread format in scientific funding in the US and also in the context of chemistry funding in the US. And this is the reason why we will be teaching you with NIH-based styles, formats, and approaches. And again, whether your idea is more appropriate to the NIH or NSF, that's something that, that is decided during the proposal crafting, and looking also at the mission of each agency. And in the context of NIH, it's the NIH mission to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. So when you're preparing the proposal to NIH, you're really thinking about biological applications, health, biochemistry, something which is related to health, metabolism, or so on and so forth. So with this, I'd like to stop here. I believe I've done quite a bit of a job to be able to introduce why funding is important to drive our science, why we're going to be doing NIH type of the proposals during this class. And I would rather turn not the microphone, I don't know how to call it, the share screen to Mary-Kay. There we go. So let me stop share my screen. Mary-Kay, how do you switch over?